Morning, how are you? Sorry, I was in the bathroom.
Not a worry, sir. Not a worry. So we just did an introduction, but we can go through it again here just so everybody's joining. So just to
No
go
need
over it.
introduction, man. I'm here. Let's dive into it, man. I want to thank the good folks at Skip the Dishes for taking Mooby and spreading it like a virus across. Well, we shouldn't say that in these times. Spreading it across the provinces, starting, of course, right out here in Ontario, man. We've been doing the pickup thing in Etobicoke, which I believe they've extended for a week. Now we're in delivering, thanks to Skip the Dishes, they're delivering in Etobicoke, Newmarket, downtown Toronto, and of course the Hammer. They're going to Hamilton. So thanks to these good folks, we're able to bring movies up, and hopefully it'll just keep spreading west and east so that we can cover the entire Great White. Back in 1999, we had a movie called Dogma. That was the first flick where we'd introduced a fake fast food joint. Rather than writing in a McDonald's or a Burger King, we just created our own fast food joint called Mooby's. Mooby, based on Mooby the Golden Calf. Character in our movies had a vast media empire along the lines of Disney or back then Barney or something like that. Part of that was a fast food joint. So we used it as a location in Dogma. Chris Rock, Linda Fiorentino, me, and Jay were sitting outside of a movie. That was our very first movie. Then in Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back, we brought it back. Jay and Silent Bob see movies and go there to eat stuff. That's where they do the internet. Then we did movies farther. We took it to a whole movie with Clerks 2. So Clerks 2, instead of being set at the convenience store, was set at a movies. And then just recently it popped up again in Jay and Silent Bob reboot as the boys were crossing country. We stopped. So it's been this fictional fast food joint in our movies for going back 20 years at this point. And mercifully, Derek Berry, who's our partner, at the beginning of the quarantine out here in West Hollywood, was like, hey, do you guys, I do pop-up restaurants. Do you guys want to do movies? Like, we can totally do movies in real life. So I was down like a clown, man. I always thought it was low fruit. Like sooner or later, somebody's going to figure it out and do this. I never thought I would do it because like restaurant business, I worked in as a busboy when I was like 14. I never wanted to go back to it. So suddenly this brought me in. I was a backdoor restaurateur, which sounds way more erotic than I intended. So like, let's try it in WeHo. We'll do it for a month. It was close to me and Jay, so we could just drive down and stuff like that, take pictures and stuff. And so at the end of the day, it went very well. The whole thing went very well in Hollywood. So there was a restaurant in New Jersey, a pizza place called Gianni's, that reached out to Red Bank, where our comedy store is, and said, can we do it here? And it had never occurred to us to do it elsewhere. You know, suddenly we're like, all right, let's take it back to Red Bank, where Jay and Silent Bob were born and stuff. That killed, man. The one in Los Angeles, let's go a month. It wound up going 2 months. New Jersey, we did a week, and that set the model for what we do going forward. So me and Jay show up in a city, the movie's open. Sometimes we do a show if it's possible to do a drive-in show or something. But we're there to cut the ribbon and take pictures on the first day. So we had no idea that this was going to become a thing. And then suddenly it did. Jersey happened. After Jersey, Chicago happened. We did it in Chicago at St. Louis Assembly. Then up at Kitchen Hub in Etobicoke up in Canada. And now, we just announced we're doing first act in Minneapolis and Minnesota. So I go to the ones down here. I couldn't go to the ones up north because, as we know, wisely, your PM is like, keep your filthy asses down in the. So once we get the order and we're allowed to go back up, I see a few more movies pop-ups happening, particularly like Vancouver. It's a no-brainer, man. Vancouver is where I went to film school, my favorite cities in the world, so, and right above us. So I imagine, when the borders are opened up, vaccines are in full effect, we'll be heading up to Vancouver to do a show at the Rio and then go to a movie when it opens there. Only way that all happens is if Skip the Dishes comes in as a partner, which they did. Thank them. Big fan of the cow tipper just because it's something like we've been talking about movies since Clerks 2, and seeing it come to life was kind of awesome. We do it with the regular burger version for people that like meat, and then for vegans like me, we do a Beyond Meat version. I'm a huge fan of Beyond Meat, so I love the cow tipper. I'm a big fan of the hater tots, which are basically very salty tater tots. We've added Mooty, which both vegan and non-vegan. That's locally themed dish. But my favorite dish on the menu, I don't order it, a non-vegan, but I love to hear people order it. Is a sandwich we call the Cox. People struggle to order that or smile when they order it is just worth the price of admission for me. Not having a permanent brick and mortar movies, being able to like just go from place to place has this weird freedom of like, so this is what it would be like if like, I was attractive enough to date many people back in the day. So I do dream of like maybe a permanent movies, but not as much as I dream about like, how far can we take this? Like, how many cities can we go to? Like, can we one day have a map with a bunch of pins in it indicating where we've been? There's so many pins on the map that it's like it's noticeable. You can see it from space. So for me, I would like a brick and mortar, but I'm more happy to go in and cosplay restaurants. That's way easier. No, I go first. Like, you know what I'm saying? I'm not strong. I'm weak of heart and body. I would imagine if they're running zombies, I'm caught dead fast. I'm not very quick. So if the zombies are fast, like in 28 days later, forget it. I'm toast. If they're slow zombies, like in Walking Dead or the Romero films, maybe I buy myself a little more time. But that's usually a game of numbers, like where you running in one direction, they're all following you, and suddenly there's a wall of them coming from the other direction. I'm sure I would be that guy. I know I would not be the person that let the zombies in. Like, you remember in Dead when the one guy laid down on the platform and like let all the zombies down into the base and stuff? I don't think I would be that guy. I'd go out like angrily and weaponizing the zombies. But I do feel like I killed the first two weeks of the outbreak. I don't make it to the helicopter in the mall. I'll tell you that much. I honestly don't think I'm talented enough to pull that kind of thing off. It takes true visionary directors to make those like visual spectacles, and I'm a fan. I love watching that stuff. More so than somebody reaching out like, "Will you direct this?" I'd be like, "Why don't you let somebody talented direct it? But I would love to be in it. Put me in that thing, man." Like that. At this point in my career, I'm happy to make Kevin Smith movies and stuff. But if somebody from the outside world was like, "Come play in our sandbox," directing a like is less interesting to me than actually being in that thing, because I don't think I could bring anything to it. Director as a storyteller, and I can't even say that I can necessarily bring something to an actor, but that'd be at least good for me because I'd be like, "Did you see me in The Mandalorian?" But like, you can't really like show. You can show up directing, but like so many people are involved in making a production. So if I got to direct an episode of like even when I directed episodes of Supergirl and Flash, I never took credit. I was never like, "Those were mine. Without my vision, they never would have happened." Like, they make that show every week with or without me. They write scripts every week with or without me. She flies with or without me. He goes running real fast with. So they don't need me for that, so I can't bring anything to it like that. Where I could possibly stand out is if they hire me as a performer, and then maybe I could bring something. But I know for a fact, like, I'd ruin a Marvel movie, man. You think Thor: The Dark World is the least favorite Marvel movie ever made? I'd be like, hold my beer. I ruin it for everybody else. So I'm a fan. Like, I because I make movies and because, there are other movies that I don't make, and every once in a while people are like, hey, you make movies, you should make that movie. But I always like to remind people, like, I started as a fan long before I was a filmmaker, and to a fan I will eventually return. But like, when I watched those movies growing up, like Empire Strikes Back, Raiders of the Lost Ark, all the movies in the 70s and the 80s that I grew up watching, never once did they make me want to be a filmmaker. They made me want to watch more of those movies. It wasn't until I saw Richard Linklater's Slacker in 1991 that I'm like, ooh, that makes me want to be a filmmaker. So it stands to reason for me that, like, as much as I love the Marvel movies, I'm content to have them be my soap operas. There's also a thing where when you get involved, sometimes like your appreciation for a thing diminishes. Like, I love Degrassi, and then I got to be on Degrassi a couple times, so many times that by the last time, like, oh, I guess this is me now. I bomb around the halls of Degrassi and give teenagers advice they didn't ask for. So the more you do it, the maybe the shine comes off. Maybe it's not as precious to you anymore. And I love those Marvel movies. Those are my stories. The way my grandmother would watch her soap operas, that's how I watch those Marvel movies. So I don't want to risk ever. And number one, there's no chance this ever happened, and they never tapped me anyway. But I would never want to risk, like, oh, I made one. I know how the sausage is made, so now I'm not really into those. Like, I like being 50 and having something to look forward to in those movies. They make me feel young, and I'm sure there are some people who are like, those movies are infantilizing a generation. I don't give a shit. I love those movies, man. I have no criticism for them. They are what movies are supposed to be. Escapism, pure fantasy, pure fun and stuff. And I'm not that guy. Like, I've never been I love talking about escapist fare and fantasy movies, but I've never been the one that really made them. Dogma is about as close as I get, and that's more religious fantasy and stuff. So I don't ever look at a Marvel movie and be like, I could do that, or even I want to do that. I see a Marvel movie and I'm like, show me another one. Spoilers, tell me what's going to happen next and stuff like that. So I don't think you'll ever see that. I think I will, if they allow me, continue to like do the occasional Supergirl and Flash or something like that. But that's more my speed, because you could do an episode of those shows in 8 days. 8 days and you're done. You cannot make a Marvel movie or a DC movie or a Star Wars, anything, in 8 days, man. They're huge, and you got to put like a year into that stuff. And I just don't. I'd rather put a year into my stuff. Like, there's that part of it too, where at the end of the day, the longer you spend putting work into somebody else's thing, that's less time you're putting into your thing. And I didn't jump into this business so I could be like, I want to make a Marvel movie. They didn't even exist when I started. I jumped into this business just to tell these goofy little New Jersey stories and stuff. Oh my God, absolutely. Nobody's asked me to do that yet.
Well, there you go.
And I am Iron Bob. Skip up there for me is hands down Beyond Burger at A&W. But I'm also the kind of guy that will go in and get the burgers on location. Just because I asked for someone, like, can you leave this off, this off? Basically, I just get patty and bread, and some ketchup in some cases and stuff. So sometimes that's tougher to communicate on an app. Sometimes actually walk in. But when I walk into an A&W, it's always a charming experience of somebody being like, you're Kevin James. And I'm like, well, close. I mean, honestly, growing up in Jersey, like, I'd never had disco fries until I was in my 20s. It's a diner food. But like, when I went to the diner with my parents, they were never like, get disco fries. That's like a late night kind of thing. So I didn't discover disco fries in my 20s. But between I'm just setting that up because I don't have a long-standing affinity to disco fries, even though it is a delicacy. But I still side with those, I think, over poutine, because cheese curds, well, I mean, now obviously I'm vegan, but cheese curds were were too big. They were so chunky and clumpy and stuff. Whereas disco fries, you put like one slice of American cheese that just melts over everything. and then gravy on top of it. So I'm thankful like that anybody ever partners up with us to do it. I was really thankful for up in Canada, both Kitchen Hub and Skip the Dishes, like treating it real seriously. Skip the Dishes gave us like a digital billboard. Somebody sent me a screen cap. They're like, "You're in the sky in Toronto," and I was like, "That's all I've ever wanted." It came from Scott Mosier. Was very tight. My producer Scott Mosier was very tight with Gwen Turner, who was a writer actor who had written and starred in a movie called Go Fish, which played up at Sundance the same year. Also a black and white film, but that was about lesbians, group of lesbians, breakthrough film, historical. So Scott and Gwen Turner became friends and were hanging out all the time. They met at Sundance. And then after the festival, we went back to New Jersey and they lived in New York. Scott and Gwen would hang out all the time. And it was clear that Scott was kind of smitten with her. And so I was just like, you should write a movie. You should write a script about what it feels like to fall in love with a lesbian, like somebody who's not going to return your affection. And he goes, no, I don't want to do that. And I was like, all right, I'll do it. And so that was where it started. But then I was in a relationship with Joey Adams at that point. And we were going through our own stuff in as much as like I'm very inexperienced compared to her. And I'm not talking sexually experience, like life experience. Joey had like traveled the world, lived a big life. I'd never. And so our relationship was imbalanced. And I was like, my self-esteem issues were so terrible. So I was the kind of guy that was always like, did you cheat on me? Would you cheat on me? Please don't cheat on me. That kind of guy. And ladies, guys, ladies love that. Ladies love a man who has low self-esteem and is constantly begging not to cheat on them and stuff. So I was like, I'm right about falling in love with a lesbian. I will use that framework and tell my story with Joey. So at the heart of Chasing Amy is a story that really doesn't have anything to do with bisexuality whatsoever. It's really just about a guy who can't get over himself. And so it came from there. It was a gestalt, if you will, of all those things. Also, it followed Mallrats, and Mallrats had really hard. Like Mallrats cost us $5 million to make, it only made $2 million. So at that point, I was like throwing a Hail Mary as well, where I'm like, I started with Clerks, it was well respected, it was a film, and then Mallrats was what we called a movie. So much stuff, so I get that credibility back, and that was a big component. Desperation is a component that, and an ingredient that you can't really plan for. But it was like, oh my God, if we don't do something fast, they might not let us make another movie. We might be out of this industry altogether. So that helped inform it as well. Nothing to lose. Like I remember saying to Joey and Jason Lee and Ben Affleck, like, look, this is it. This is where we get to show them what we could do, all of us. And if we do this right, like we get new opportunities. So there was that element to it as well. All of us trying to showcase what we could do rather than be dismissed as just this. Like Joey, she was like, oh, that's that girl with that heel. And Ben was the bully from those movies, like Hughes and Mallrats. So Jason Lee barely had a profile. He'd only been in Mallrats. He was a professional skateboarder. And I was coming off, which everyone was like, it sucks. You're finished. So we had nothing to lose. There was nowhere to go but up. All of us poured ourselves into it, and it worked out. It paid off in the long run. Now the movie is like problematic for some cats in terms of it hasn't aged well for some folks, and some folks weren't even around when it was made. Like a movie about this guy telling a story about falling in love with a bisexual, like she's not even a. Is more of a bi. You can pull that apart now in 2020, of course, but I always try to remind people like it was in 1997. And for 1997, by a straight white male filmmaker, pretty progressive, like for that time. And it may not have aged well, but like it was trying to be something more back, yearned for something for a higher purpose. And for years was considered like my umbrella film. Like no matter what I did, if things got bad, people like this sucks. You know, I was always like, yeah, but I did make Amy, and I put up my umbrella so you know, don't get the shit rain on you. And now it's an umbrella with holes in it. Now the umbrella is Dogma. I'm like, yeah, but I did make Dogma, and they're like, all right, he did that. Clerks 3 in the works, still writing it right now, a new version of it in the event. It looks like the next one is going to be Twilight of the Mallrats, a sequel to Mallrats, which I believe we're getting into next year. It looks very, very good right now. Yes, yes. In the Clerks 3 script, he does find true love. I'll tell you, comedy has gotten harder and everybody can completely democratized. You know, you jump on Twitter and you makes you laugh so hard you cry and realize like I, that's funnier than anything I've done in a movie in 10 years or something like that. Comedy is way more nimble outside the movie realm. When you write a movie, you know, it takes half a year to a year from script to script. And during that, new developments are happening. You know, opportunities for comedy are constantly repeating themselves, and you're stuck in a script that has been locked in order to do the job that you'd kind of do. So I found that like in the beginning, like it was easy to be like, oh, he's funny, he does comedy to stand out. Now everybody's funny. It's kind of like that old Andy Warhol thing. Everyone in the future will be famous for 15 minutes. He was close. It's not famous. It's everyone in the future is funny for 15 minutes, man. Thanks to social media, anybody can make an observation. You don't have to write an entire show, write an entire movie, write an entire book, record an entire album. You can put out pithy 140 characters or more and play the room, absolutely own the room. Or you can like Sarah Cooper, who's just like, I'm just going to lip sync Trump and build an entire career off that. So there's a lot of competition in comedy right now, man. And that's not a bad. As a consumer of comedy, as a person who likes comedy, that's great because everyone's being funny now. That means you're getting free laughs all over the place. As somebody that works in comedy, yeah, it's like, oh my God, it's crowded in here, you know, and suddenly you're not the only game in town. There are a lot of games in town. And you got to remember, I started as like, he's from nowhere. He's got no connections. He's one of us. And so I enjoyed that rare breathing space of having authenticity as somebody who came from the people and having a job as somebody who tried to be funny. But everybody now is authentic. All great comedy comes from authenticity, of the authenticity of like the internet, social media, honesty. We're in a world right now where it's so sometimes backwards and unbelievable. You can't help but laugh, and it's bringing out great comedians like what do they call them? Outliers. You know, people who are not necessarily like I do comedy for a living, but are legit funny enough to do so. And some of them going like, oh, this is what I am now. Like I've watched a series of comics do those videos over the course of the last year where, you know, most of them are very politically bent. But like, you know, people who don't necessarily aren't trained performers, weren't thinking about a life in entertainment other than like, oh, I like movies and stuff like that, who suddenly now have like opportunities wide open to them. Sarah Cooper just had a Netflix special. So like, you know, and 1 year ago, she was somebody who started lip syncing, you know, to Donald Trump's press conferences. Sky's the limit, man. Like at this point, anybody could be a comedian. You know, it doesn't necessarily mean you're the best comedian. Like I'm not even that, but like anybody can be funny. Anybody jump out there and shine at this point. So comedy's gotten crowded. And as a fan, that's awesome. But as a producer of comedy, like every day I look around and be like, I'm not going to be needed here pretty soon. Like, I used to do, observational stuff that covered a lot of grounds. Now my comedy is very like Kevin Smith centric because that's the only area that I'm uncontested. Like I don't have to compete with somebody else. If I wanted to go out there and talk politics, fuck, I'd be competing with a slew of people who are like who can knowledgeably speak about politics and are funny on. To start, I mean, in the last how comedy changed in the last 26 years since Clerks was it's become very niche. I've had to find my little corner of it to hold on to. Otherwise, I'd be out of it altogether because there are new funny people introduced every damn day. So my corner of the world is like Kevin Smith, comic books, movies, and stuff. But I don't even own that anymore. Like it used to be like I was the Star Wars guy. I mean, I can tell you all the Star Wars jokes. Star Wars is telling Star Wars jokes now. Like Mandalorian's funny. So it's like you don't need a guy going, hey, what if like the guys working at the Death Star were innocent? And people like, shut up, we want to watch The Mandalorian. Like, it's weird. Or it's also weird to watch how many people do that now. Like Star Wars, like I'm not even. I used to be the only one. Now I'm not even in the top like fucking 90% of people who are funny with Star Wars. So it's and oddly enough, my career. Like it certainly didn't pave the way for that, but I am one of them. Like I am somebody who was in the audience who just liked movies, and I was going to try to do it. And so I've met many people over the years, people who have gotten unfathomably rich off of YouTube with their own YouTube channel, who are like, oh my God, we loved Clerks. And because of that, we wanted to make our own YouTube channel, and now we're billionaires. And I'm like, can I have some money? And they're like, no. So it's, when you jump into it, you run the very positive risk of inspiring somebody else. Like Richard Linklater made Slacker, that inspired me, and suddenly I went into filmmaking and went into entertainment. You got to know that everything you say, post, write, produce, you are potentially inspiring somebody else out there to use their own voice and whatnot. And that's beautiful. There's no greater calling than to let people find out who they are, than to inspire people to find their voices. But it's self-defeating because you create your own competition all the time by doing that. When you inspire people like, hey man, chase your dreams, they're like, I will. And then one day you're neck and neck with them for like some position you would like to have. So it's bittersweet, man. But at the end of the day, that's my legacy. Like as much as I like the movies I've made and everything I've done, I think like now that I've had years to look at, come up with a take on it. I think the most important thing that I've added to business was belief in self. When people saw me do it and they're like, oh, if he can do it, maybe I can do it. And I love that as my legacy now. I love meeting people who are like, I saw your thing and it made me want to do my thing. Like, great, do your things. That's gonna inspire somebody to do their fucking thing. If everybody's doing their thing in terms of artistically, not like do my thing where I'm like, I like to kill people. Don't do your thing if that's your thing. But if everybody's doing their artistic thing or their self-expression thing, think about how much better the world would be. Everybody content, everybody feeling it. And there wouldn't be a bunch of people on the sidelines being like, your self-expression sucks, because they'd be self-expressing as well. And not self-expressing negativity at somebody else, just putting their song out there and stuff. So for me, like that's what I'll spend the rest of my life doing. Making stuff, but communicating to people like, you can do this. There's no reason you shouldn't be doing this, for heaven's sakes. If you are interested in this sort of thing, if you're the kind of person that has ever sat through the full credits of a movie at the end, not looking for a Marvel after scene, just because you were like, I want to read the credits. You're a filmmaker, you just haven't made a film yet. You'll get there. Like a couple of years ago, I almost the test and applied for citizenship, and not because of Trump. This was years before. Like back in the early 2000s, I was like, oh my God, I would love to be dual citizen. So I'm always hoping that after all this time, like sooner or later, some here in government, some PM will just be like, look, just give him an honorary, man. Like, if he wants it, give it to him. And It would be kind of amazing. But I also think that I could take and pass the test because you have to know a lot about Canadian history. And I think I'm well schooled enough where I think I could pass that test without a lot of study. Thank you so much, folks. Enjoy your weekend as it comes up. Get some movies if you like. If not, enjoy your weekend regardless. You live in one of the best countries in this entire planet, man. You guys are doing it right up there. Thank God you're our neighbors to the north. And I miss you, and I can't wait to